Hi everyone, welcome to our week 4 critiques. I thought this week I would do a audio-visual critique. So first of all, everyone could hear me talk about the images a little bit more. And of course, secondly, so everyone can see what your peers and classmates are doing. So with that being said, let's talk about assignment 4.1, which was your large depth of field and small depth of field assignment. So really the gist of this assignment is I want you to be able to take one photograph where the subject is in focus and the background is out of focus. We call that the small depth of field photograph. And then I want you to take another photograph, just the opposite of that, where you'll have everything in focus from the foreground all the way to the background. And of course we call that the large depth of field. First person's work that I want to look at is Kaylee's. And again, because we are online here and I don't get to meet you guys in person, if I pronounce your names wrong, please forgive me, and certainly feel free to shoot me an email with a phonetic correction. So that being said, here's Kaylee's work. First of all, here is her large depth of field image, and then I'll just click over to her small depth of field image. And I think in the small depth of field image, really, you pretty much nailed it. We can see that top is very sharply focused and our background is blurry, or another term that we like to use is soft. So this is spot on what I'm looking for. Little trick here, if you go into the file and file info, you can actually see the settings that you are using. And this is typically what I would expect here in her settings. A very low aperture value or f-stop number of 4.5 and a slow shutter setting here of 1/50th of a second. So excellent job on your small depth of field. Then if we look at your large depth of field image, yes, I can see that your foreground and your background are a little bit more in focus. But let's take a look at the numbers here and see if we can figure out what's going on, because the image does seem a little bit soft to me. And sure enough, when we go in there, we can see that your exposure time is at 1/12th of a second and an f-stop of 13. Well, that f-stop of 13 is probably where it should be, a high f-stop number. That should give us a pretty large depth of field. But I think what's going on here is you have a very slow shutter setting, which is 1/12th of a second. I wonder, did you have your camera on a tripod here? I suspect that maybe you didn't. And the fact that this shutter is so slow, it's probably going to pick up a little bit of blur that is related to the shaking that you have when you handhold a camera. So the exposure that we really want to shoot for, the time, if we're going to hand hold a camera, is about 1/60th of a second. So in this instance, I think that you probably are getting some blurriness from camera shake rather than anything related to the depth of field here. So as I said, your f-stop, that's where it needs to be. f13, f16, f22. That should give us that large depth of field. But unfortunately, I think what we've just got going on here is a little bit of motion blur or a blur to the shake due to the shake of the camera. So keep that in mind and really try to pay attention to those shutter settings. Okay, next up we have Kayla's work. And in her small depth of field shot, we've got the bread in the foreground that is in focus and our broccoli in the background that is out of focus or soft. Great job again here with this shallow depth of field. I think if we probably went into our settings, I'd be willing to bet that we're going to see that we have a f-stop that is pretty low, which sure enough it is, and an appropriate 1/60th of a second. So if you remember from the previous image, I said that 1/60th is kind of your magic number that you want to be at when you're hand holding something. So in this instance, you did a good job here. And then your large depth of field image. I just want to point out, you're calling it the deep depth of field. which certainly that describes what's going on, but I really want you to use the terminology large depth of field rather than deep depth of field. That'll be a little confusing if you use that word deep depth of field. So let's call it large depth of field. And in this instance, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and it looks like you got the broccoli in focus, you've got the bread in focus, but this one piece of bread that is in the foreground looks like it's just a little bit out of focus here. So if we take a look at your file info, you're at an f-stop of 9 here, which is still a little bit on the low side for a large depth of field image. We'd like to see that at maybe 11, ideally 16 or 22, which of course is going to cause you to either change your exposure setting or change your ISO to be able to work that a little bit higher. So that is why you didn't get that full depth of field. You got kind of 3/4 of a depth of field here. So you need to go a little bit higher up with that f-stop setting. But of course, if your shutter gets very slow here, you're going to need to use a tripod, or you're going to have to find something to stabilize the camera on. So good job here with this. By the way, beautiful photos. I love your composition, your arrangement, the way that you've set up the image here. Even with these little lines in the cutting board, I think they really help lead our eye through the image here. So good job. And next up, we have Ty's images. And of course, we've got his shallow depth of field, or small depth of field here. And the first image, the cup is in focus perfectly. We can read the roll up the rim to win writing on there. And the background then is really almost completely blurry. You know, we can kind of see that there's some pictures on the wall, but for the most part, they're really out of focus. Let's take a look at the magic numbers here. And again, a low f-stop value, which I would totally expect. F-stop of 4.2. Exposure setting of 1/30th of a second. I wonder if you had your camera on a tripod, because this looks really sharp. You know, your cup is very focused, and at a 1/30th of a second hand holding, that probably would be tough to do. So great job here. Interesting choice of ISO settings. Your ISO is 100 and you're in a pretty dark room. So that certainly is one reason why we don't see a lot of noise in this image. It wouldn't sort of make sense to start off with shooting at an ISO of 100 in a dark area, but I think you've pulled it off really good here, and you've really been able to take advantage of the fact that now your image really doesn't have any noise to it, and it looks very sharp. Great job with this image. And then your large depth of field shot, again, I think is really spot on here. Everything's in focus all the way from the foreground to the background. I just wonder if, I feel like I want to move this cup over just a little bit so it's kind of in this pool of light here. Compositionally, this is really beautiful. You know, you've got these lines that sort of draw our eye into the frame here, but I'm almost feeling like just moving that cup a little bit compositionally might help your image just a little bit. Also love this shadow. I think that shadow also adds a sense of drama to the photograph. So great job with your small and large depth of field, and also great job with your exposure. This is not an easy spot to get a good exposure in, and I think you've managed to pull that off perfectly. So great work here, Ty. And next up, we've got Joey's images. In the first image, in our small depth of field, we've got the tea kettle or the water kettle in focus, and the wood-burning stove in the background out of focus. I think you've mastered the technique perfectly. What I really love about this image is you've gone in and taken this really low vantage point here. So I think it offers the viewer sort of a different perspective than one might normally see if you walked into this room here. So big pat on the back to you for trying something a little different and not shooting things at eye level, rather getting down low and taking an unusual vantage point. So great job with your shallow depth of field. And if we flip over to your large depth of field, again, you've mastered the technique really well. The one thing about this image that I think it doesn't work compositionally as well with the large depth of field because it gets really busy in the background area here. Sort of all these details start to run into each other and it just kind of gets a little bit busy and confusing. Whereas in this shot, that background and that wood-burning stove is a little bit soft, so our eye kind of works through these little details in the pieces of stick or twigs or whatever those are that are wrapped around the tea kettle. Whereas here, it kind of gets a little bit busy, and I think even also having this little bit of a lens flare in there also pulls our attention away from this very interesting stuff that's going on there. But technically, you nailed the technique. Absolutely, there's a large depth of field. Just really watch out on your large depth of field images to not have super busy backgrounds because things then really start to blend into each other because everything's in sharp focus. So great job with the technique. Just keep that busy background factor in the back of your head. So in our next group of images here, we have Rachel's large depth of field photograph, and we'll just click through real quick to show you her small depth of field. And I think you've got this technique mastered. What I really love about this image is the thing that's in focus is the writing. I think if another part of the mug or even part of the background was the thing that was in focus, it might make for kind of a confusing image having the writing out of focus because our brains look at writing and they want to read it. So I'm glad that you've got that in focus here. And let's just take a quick look at what your settings are. And again, you're at an f-stop of 4.5, an exposure of 1/100th of a second. I think that is perfect for this shot, so great job here. And then your large depth of field shot, generally speaking, I think you've got the technique down. One of the things you have to remember is when you're very close to something, that depth of field is going to be exaggerated a little bit. So the small depth of field is going to be really exaggerated the closer you get to something. So the background here is in focus for the most part, but it's just a teeny bit soft. And I think the reason for that is you're just so close to this. I'd be willing to bet if we jump in here and take a look at your numbers, you're probably at a high f-stop, which is exactly what it is. You're at an f-stop of 18, which is perfect. So really the issue here is just that you're so close. You're almost mimicking the effect of a telephoto lens here by getting really close to the subject. And that's why your background here is just a little bit soft. It's not really out of focus, but just a tiny bit soft. If we zoomed in here, we can see that that's just a little bit out of focus. So, you used all the right settings. It's just a matter of moving a little bit farther back, and I think that large depth of field would show through a little bit better on this. And then we move over to Liam's photo. We've got a large depth of field shot of his guitar, and then small depth of field shot the same way. I have to say I really love the layout of this image. Love the way those strings kind of pull our eye through the frame, and then ultimately they land right in this area where the strings meet the neck of the guitar. So beautiful job there. Your image is kind of skewed a little bit towards the right side of the frame. I almost would be interested in seeing if we kind of centered up this image a little bit here and took a little different approach to it. Maybe something like that. Realize I'm a little bit more zoomed in. But I think I kind of like that a little bit better. You've sort of got a little bit of dead space over here that really isn't doing anything for you. So maybe just bringing that into the center a little bit, I think aesthetically might help that image a lot. But great job with that small depth of field. In fact, I'd almost love to see you shoot this small depth of field shot with a large aperture value and see how that would come out, because I think this also could be a very interesting shot with all of this in focus. But you did you moved up, changed up a little bit here, and in this shot again you've got the technique correct. The background's in sharp focus and the foreground's in sharp focus here. The composition I think is a little clunky here. You know, you've got these lines crisscrossing in the back, and it just sort of interrupts the beautiful frame of, or the beautiful shape of the guitar here. So I just think from a compositional perspective, I really like this a lot better than the other view that you gave us from the side here. Nonetheless, technically speaking, you did what I was looking for. Let's take a look at your settings here. Yep. Oh, well, actually, we're looking at this, and I'm seeing that you're at an f-stop of 4.5. So probably the reason we're getting a large depth of field here is you're kind of a little bit far away from the background. So in this instance, I think I'd like to see you maybe go up to an f-stop somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 or 16, which again, looking at those numbers, I think you're at pretty slow shutter setting. So in this instance, if you did move that f-stop up higher, we would need to use a tripod or something to support the camera on. And by the way, I'm not sure whether I've mentioned it in the modules at all, but you do have the ability to go up to the media center on the 4th floor of Old Main and sign out a tripod. So along with your cameras, you can sign out tripods up there. And in images like this where we're working with these small and large depth of fields, I think a tripod is a really handy tool to have. So for all of you guys that are working with slow shutter settings, that's definitely something that you want to take advantage of. So good work here, Liam. Just work on that large depth of field image a little bit. So our next group of images come from Andrew, and first shot is we've got a snowy cemetery scene, and I really love this image. We see a lot of images from the cemetery in the class, and you know, for the most part, they all kind of look the same. This one, you know, the addition of the snow in here and not really having any signs of footprints or people or something like that in there really adds to the quiet serenity of this image. So from a conceptual point of view, I really like how you approach this image. Let's take a look at your settings. You've got an f-stop of 5.6, which isn't ideal for a large depth of field, but you do have two other things that are working in your favor in terms of that large depth of field. First, you've got your focal length of 20 millimeters, which that is a wide angle lens. So if you remember from the module, a wide angle lens is by nature going to give us a large depth of field. And then also you've moved back a little bit from the subject, and we'll see the difference when we switch over to your small depth of field image, how moving back from a subject extends how far that sharp focus goes into the back of the image. So the one thing I would say here, just ideally we'd like to have that f-stop a little bit higher, maybe an f-stop of 11 or an f-stop of 16. And if we jump over to your shallow depth of field image, I think you've mastered this one perfectly. We can see how the center of the gravestone is in sharp focus. If we look at our f-stop setting, it's f-stop of 5.6, which is exactly where it needs to be for this assignment. And I love the composition of it. Our eye is drawn with these lines that you've set up right to the center, and it kind of lands in that circular area, that part of the frame. The only thing that maybe we might want to do is maybe move this image like this. I think even tightening that up a little bit more makes it more dramatic, and especially calls attention to this intricate work within the stone here, and even some of it looks like the moss or the decay on the stone, and that gives it even a little bit more of an interest. So zooming in a little bit tighter here, I think, helps this image out just a little bit more. But nonetheless, great shots here, Andrew. Really like the images over at the cemetery, and I like the different perspective that you bring to these shots. Good work. Okay, our next series of images come from Judy. So we've got Judy's large depth of field and then her small depth of field. So before I get talking about your depth of field here, Judy, I've got to restate for you and for the whole class here that for these assignments, I don't want you guys using your flash. Your flash is going to give your images sort of this unrealistic and flat appearance to them, and it's going to give them some pretty strange shadows too, which we can see are going on behind this plant. So I've asked everybody to turn off their flash. I'm just going to remind everyone, when you go to shoot, you've got to turn that flash off. And if we go into your file info here, I see right away your flash fired. So we do not want your flash firing in these images. Now that being said, you've got a very wide angle lens on here. And with the wide angle lens, it's 6.39 millimeters. It's super wide. We can see then that we've got a very large depth of field from the foreground all the way to the background here. The one other thing besides the flash that I'd like to see you do to improve this image is it's really busy. I mean, where does your eye go to in this photograph? So I almost feel like I want my eye to go to this reflection in the mirror there. And so perhaps simplifying this image, maybe something like that, might help that a little bit. When you've got sort of everything in here, there's almost too much going on. My eye sort of wants to go over here first, and then it's looking at the geometric shapes and the patterns in the chair, and then sort of as I work through here, I finally discover that great reflection in the mirror. So I think that just by cropping a little bit and pulling it in, the image becomes a little bit more compelling, and that reflection then kind of becomes sort of that like little aha that is like the exclamation point on the image here. So good job with the depth of field using the wide angle lens, although your f-stop is still a little bit low. And again, you can see how that flash kind of like just makes everything look really flat in the image and throws some pretty weird shadows behind things. So again, I just want to don't want to beat you over the head with it, but I really need you to make sure that that flash is turned off for the rest of your assignments. So for your small depth of field here, again, the background is looking a little too sharp for my liking in a large depth of field shot. And if we go in and we look at your focal length, you're at 7.48 millimeters. That's pretty much wide angle still, and that's the reason that we're seeing that background still in focus a little bit. So what we want to start using is a telephoto lens and a small aperture value, which in this case, your aperture or your f-stop here is small, but I think that it's 5.0. I think really the issue here becomes that you're using such an extreme wide angle lens. You almost can't get a really good small depth of field when you're using such an extreme wide angle lens. So work on that small depth of field image for me. And again, if you have some questions about how to turn that flash off, certainly feel free to shoot me an email or get in touch with me and we can work through that. Okay, next up we have Emily's photos. And first we have her large depth of field image. and then her small depth of field image. Both images look spot on here. The subject is in focus. The trees and the car in the background are out of focus. But if we look at your numbers, we go in and, whoops, I guess your data did not embed in this image, so we can't see your numbers. But certainly from all evidence here, it looks like you've done a really wonderful job with your small depth of field. I love how this image is so symmetrical, how you placed the subject right in the middle of the frame and then use those trees on the left and the right side of the frame to balance things out. I guess in a perfect world, maybe I'd love it if this truck wasn't here, but nonetheless, I think that's still a very visually compelling photograph. And then just the opposite here, your large depth of field. Again, I think you've done a wonderful job with it here. We've got the trees now in much more focus. And one of the things that I think happens when everything is in focus here is that our eye starts to almost extend beyond the subject and starts to sort of imagine what might be going on in the background. Whereas with this image, we sort of almost stop and we're attracted to the silhouette of the subject here. Whereas when we get these trees and everything else in focus, it sort of continues to draw the visual momentum past him and deeper into the photograph, which I think is very interesting and engaging. So great job with that. Excellent examples of large depth of field and small depth of field. Good work, Emily. And then last but not least, we have Justin's images. So Justin, one of the things here, you submitted your images embedded into a Word document. Just a reminder, in the future, for the images that you shoot on your own, I want you to submit them as JPEGs. Don't embed them in your Word document. If you notice throughout this video here, when stuff is in Photoshop, I can go in and look at the numbers on things. I know you've been kind enough to write them down here so I don't have to look them up, but still want to be able to work with these images and see them in Photoshop. So make sure in the future you submit things as JPEGs rather than embedding them into Word documents. So I love how detailed you are with this information here. We've got a wide angle lens, we've got an f-stop setting of 3.5, shutter speed of 1/90th, ISO of 800, and then our second image, we can see where you've changed up to a f-stop of 14 here, and you've pretty much kept the same distance and the same lens here. The thing is, it kind of feels like in the image here that I'm assuming is supposed to be your shallow depth of field shot, that you don't really have one specific thing that's out of focus and then a background in, or one specific thing in focus and then the background out of focus. In other words, we need a subject that's in the foreground here. You don't have a lot of deep space in this image. You know, it's a very flat shot, so there's nothing really in the foreground that's going to be out of focus for us to really see the effect of that small depth of field on. You know, from my perspective here, it kind of looks like everything's sharp in both of these photos. In fact, they almost look the same. I will say one thing, I do love sort of the exposure you chose here, kind of dark, you know, almost reminds us of a dorm room with the lights off and just sort of like some light, you know, reflecting on the edge of the monitor. So I think that works really well with the large depth of field, but unfortunately on the small depth of field, you just don't have anything out of focus here. So I guess the solution here is you just got to get something in the foreground. Maybe a chair, you know, with a pillow or something thrown on top of it, just to practice that technique. So keep that in mind. And also, you know, maybe your lens here, 18 millimeters. I'd probably go with a telephoto lens if I'm working with that small depth of field. Probably, anywhere from 55 millimeters and higher. So keep that in mind also. So again, reminder, just make sure that you submit your images in the future as JPEGs rather than embedded into a Word document. Now, I just also want to finish up by saying, if you're doing an essay that I ask you to research another photographer, in that instance, it is okay to embed the images in the Word document. It's just when you're shooting your own stuff that I want you to give me separate JPEG files. Okay? That'll wrap up assignment 4.1. So I think for the most part, everybody has got the idea of it. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to shoot me an email or give me a buzz, and I can go over anything with you. That being said, I'll see you all next week.